Do you see what this is? My Nikon ZF with the lens and an aperture ring. The TTArtisan 40mm f2 lens. And I was waiting for something like this so long because this is small and compact, lightweight. And again, it has an aperture ring. Let's shoot some photos. Hi, and thank you for clicking on this video. My name is Furk, aka Phil, and a quick disclaimer before we start with the video. This TTArtisan 40mm f2 lens was sent by TTArtisan and I'm also get to keep it. But all the experience and the opinion I have in this video are all mine, and they didn't see this video before uploading. Everything is my opinion, in my opinion only. TTArtisan didn't have anything to say in this video. Normally I barely agree to these kind of free gear stuff agreements, but when TTArtisan reached out to me and said they have a 40mm f2 lens coming, which will be available for the Sony E L mount but also Nikon Z mount, I was all ears, specifically because of the ZF. And when I asked if the lens will feature an aperture ring and they said yes, I was all ears and was pretty excited about this release. Long-term viewers know that I basically beat a dead horse about lenses with aperture rings for the Nikon ZF because there's a big lack of these kind of lenses. You know that the 40mm Nikon f2 lens, the retro style one, is my normal go-to lens for the Nikon ZF. That lens is just a plastic fantastic lens, but it performs optically great. And that's the reason why I have used that lens so much. And when I unboxed this little beauty, I was very surprised about the build quality of this lens because everything is metal, and as I mentioned before, the aperture ring. Not only it's available on this lens, but it's also clicking. Again, look at this beautiful combo. The Nikon ZF with this TTArtisan 40mm f2 lens and this beautiful aperture ring. I hope you can hear it. Just beautiful. You can see here on this window, if I adjust the aperture ring accordingly, it will also show here on this aperture window, so everything is working accordingly when you adjust this aperture ring. Again, most of you who are following my channel know that I beat a dead horse about this aperturing for Nikon Z lenses, and the opinions are quite diverse, I would say. There are a lot of you who does appreciate the Nikon ZF but don't see the purpose of the aperturing. And there's the other camp where I belong to, where I just wish there would be more lenses for the Nikon Z mount, specifically designed or sized down for the Nikon ZF, which features an aperturing, but not only an aperturing, but also a clicking aperturing. Here again. And since I own the Nikon ZF since launch, this topic came up that Nikon is not able to do this. They only have that control ring where you can basically customize the aperturing on that, but that's a non-clickable, and that control ring can also be accidentally be bumped to mess up your settings. And over time, I saw that, for example, Viltrox had some lenses which also featured an aperturing. I had owned the 24mm 1.8 lens for a period of time, and that also featured an aperturing, but that unfortunately was a not clickable aperturing, and therefore the experience combined with the clickiness and tactile feel of the ZF was not there for me. I also saw that TTArtisan released a 25mm lens, which also features an aperturing. That's the first time that I saw a clickable aperturing. But the reason I was not interested into that lens is that I'm not that much of a telephoto guy, and for the ZF I always favor a small and compact lens. And with this TTArtisan 40mm f2 lens, we finally have this combo. What I was also quite surprised is not only regarding the metal high quality build of this lens, but if you compare it next to the Nikon 40mm f2 lens, just from the size perspective, you see that the diameter, at least, the Nikon lens, although both lenses basically weigh the same, this one is, of course, most of you know and also own it, plastic, completely plastic. This is metal. Yeah, if you put it side by side, you see that this lens from TTArtisan is slightly smaller and compact, although they both feature the same filter thread of 52 centimeters. And as you can see, that this small difference of size, it's not weight, it's basically the size, because both of them weigh almost the same, about 170 grams. Just this difference makes it extremely nice on the Nikon ZF. And again, featuring that clicking aperturing is just a complete package for the Nikon ZF. You have your exposure triangle finally on the Nikon ZF in a relatively compact factor, thanks to the compact and lightweight lens. And here you have now your ISO, shutter speed and exposure in your triangle. And I'm not sure if you can get this from this video, but again, because of the slightly slimmer size of this lens, it fits perfectly on the Nikon ZF. Yeah, this explains basically my excitement for this lens, because although it's not retro style, you could say, this lens, it's a neutral modern design, it looks quite amazing on the ZF. Just as a comparison, what this is something you already know. I have used this combination for most of the time of my ZF, but I always had the impression that this design is a little bit too thick on the ZF, also the lens design, and I was always saying to myself that's because of the big Z mount, but TTArtisan was able to slim this down, house this lens basically in a high quality metal build, and I'm pretty excited about this combination. Although I'm very excited about this TTArtisan lens, basically mostly from the design perspective and how it merges with the ZF. There's no comparison between these two lenses regarding the optical formula. If you are looking for a more corrected and more perfected lens, you could say, there's no way around this 40mm f2 lens. This is just great performance for the buck. The TTArtisan 40mm, in my opinion, you could say that it's has more characteristics. Some would say these are flaws, others put these flaws as pros and describe it as characteristics of the lens, aka vintage look. And I'm also more in that camp. The flares on this lens look quite nice. It does remind me on vintage glass, which I also use often on my Leica M bodies, for example. And of course you have here also stuff like color fringing and chromatic aberrations. But my personal use case, it doesn't matter that much, because when I shoot my street sessions, most of you know I'm more of a black and white shooter. If you're a color shooter, you have to consider these fringing stuff from this lens, but most of that is also possible to correct in post. The only thing I didn't like that much is how this lens vignettes, because the vignetting is as expected from a low budget entry level lens. That wide open, it's relatively heavy, but when you stop down even at f8, there's still quite some vignetting to see, and the vignetting is quite hard, you could say. It doesn't smooth out nicely, but it's relatively hard. And here again, you can correct most of that in post. I'm normally a fan of vignetting. I put vignetting always into my post editing. The vignetting closing down, that was something I noticed quite on this lens. But other than that, I just enjoy this lens very much, not only, as I mentioned, with the Nikon ZF, of course, basically waiting for a lens which matches the Nikon ZF with a clickable aperture ring and a small housing. This is the first lens I have in that context. And as I said, as a black and white shooter, I don't mind all these kind of flaws of this lens at all. But again, if you're a color shooter, that's something you have to consider. Now again, between these two lenses, the Nikon 40mm f2 and this TTArtisan f2 lens, as I mentioned, this one, if you were looking for a more corrected image, this one is clearly the winner. If you are looking for more of a vintage character lens, this is more the choice. Regarding pricing, you could say, yeah, sure, the TTArtisan is a no-brainer for the price of around $170. And this Nikon 40mm f2 lens, especially the SE version, starts around, I think, $300. The normal version is around $250, I think. To be fair, this lens is now also widely available on the second market. You can get this lens also already around $200, and therefore it comes down to your preference. If you want a more corrected image, take the Nikon lens, and if you want a more vintage style looking lens, look at the TTArtisan. I didn't have time to do a side-by-side comparison between these two lenses. But if you're interested, let me know down in the comments below. Yeah, if there are a lot of you who are looking forward for a side-by-side comparison between these two lenses on the Nikon ZF, I will make it possible. Autofocus performance was on the TTArtisan 40mm also fine. I saw in other review videos about this lens, the autofocus performance can be a little bit of missing. This has been fixed by a firmware update from TTArtisan. So if you get your lens, make sure to update to the latest firmware update, and then the autofocus should be improved. Yeah, that was my quick hands-on video on this TTArtisan f2 40mm lens with a clickable aperture ring. And as you might have noticed, I'm very excited about this lens, simply because I was waiting since day one when I had the ZF that something like that will come sometime. And the only message I have left is Nikon, please consider this again. Put clickable aperture rings in your native lenses. There is definitely a demand for that. I'm not sure how market research shows that, but all other brands do it. Sony, Canon, and so on, all their full-frame lenses have clickable aperture rings. I'm still hoping that Nikon will also jump to this trend, specifically for the Nikon ZF it would be highly appreciated. Also because I'm still waiting for the 1.4 lenses, the 35mm and the 50mm from Nikon to have retro design and aperture rings, but not sure if this will ever come. For now, I'm very happy with this combo, the Nikon ZF and this TTArtisan lens. I will shoot this combo more on the streets in the upcoming weeks. And as I said, if you want a side-by-side comparison between these two lenses, let me know down below in the comments. If you made it until this point, thank you very much for your time. You are the one who deserves the like for that. If you want to support my small little channel, click the affiliate links below in the description. The link to this lens is also below in the description. And if you want to find out why I'm considering the Fujifilm X-E5, just click on this video and have a nice day.